Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up and working with basic water meth control with our Link G5 and G4X systems. So this tutorial is going to focus on integrating the programming within our Link to an external water meth kit. So something like an AEM or Aquamist, that's what we're going to be covering in this training tutorial. Those have fail-safe strategies built into the controller brain that controls the progressive spray in the water meth kit. So we're looking for an advanced water meth kit to be able to do proper water meth injection on your engine, and then integrating that to the Link so that if there's a fault or there's a problem in the system, that controller brain can output a signal to the Link, and we can integrate that to switch from fuel and spark timing compensation where the water meth is spraying, switch it back to the normal fuel and spark compensation as we'd find from the main fuel and spark timing table, as well as provide a limiter strategy so that you can't damage the engine. So we need to make sure that this is set up correctly and integrated correctly. That way we avoid engine damage. When we're spraying the water meth solution into our engine, we need to reduce how much fuel we're spraying out of our port fuel injectors. So we back that down a bit to compensate. We also typically add a little bit more spark advance. So we add a couple more degrees of timing when we're spraying the water meth and or adding more boost pressure. We have a pretty large tuning window with the water meth because it provides much denser air charge coming into our engine, as well as giving us more octane based. That's if we're spraying petrol fuel, it'll bump up our octane considerably. So we can get a lot more boost, a lot more spark advance. If the water meth stops spraying, we're going to be in a disastrous situation. We've leaned out the mixture so much. We have a lot more spark advance and or a lot more boost pressure. It puts us in a dangerous situation where the engine will definitely knock and definitely get damaged extremely quick. So in order to avoid engine damage, we need to set up our programming and structure things here very specifically so that we avoid any issues. So what we're going to do here is learn how we can integrate either an AEM or an Aquamist kit. There needs to be an arming switch that we need to configure and wire. There's also going to be our fail-safe output from the brain controller from either kit that we need to integrate to the Link. Both are pretty simple to set up, but we definitely want to understand how to do this. So let's jump in here. Let's take a look first at an AEM water meth kit schematic so we understand the components in the kit and what we're doing in terms of integrating the wiring from that kit to our vehicle and the Link. Then we'll talk about the Aquamist. It's pretty similar in terms of the wires that we need to wire in. And then we'll talk about setting this up for the control strategy. We will be working with 4 or 5D fuel and spark timing compensation tables. We'll also be working with setting up an auxiliary rev limiter in case there's a fault in the system and we're spraying the water meth. It'll immediately kick it into a rev limiter so the engine doesn't get damaged. So we're going to learn how to do all this. So the first thing I have coming up on screen is the AEM schematic for their water meth kit. We're going to find this is their progressive kit. It has a brain controller. You can find that front and center here on our picture schematic. This is going to have 2 knobs. The left knob is a start spray. The right knob is the end or max spray. So the start spray should be typically 4 to 8 PSI. You're going to be starting things at, and then you're going to be ending it usually 2 to 4 PSI before your maximum boost pressure. That's going to be that right knob. This is a progressive spray, so it's going to begin spraying, and then it'll have that max or full spray at the other right knob setting. This is essentially going to be ramping up or down the pump speed to the water pump in the kit. And we can find that it's going to be located over here to the left. It's a pretty simple pulse width modulated control. We can actually do that from the Link, which is we're going to take a look at this in the next tutorial talking about advanced water meth injection setup and configuration, because your Link can actually replace that entire brain controller. But for right now, we're going to assume you have the kit existing on the vehicle and you want to integrate this and keep things simple. So the progressive pump controller brain is controlling the water meth pump that's ramping up or down the speed. When it ramps up the speed, that ramps up the pressure, then applies more water meth solution into the engine. So it's pretty simple. Now, we have our liquid tank that's holding the water meth solution. So it's going to be up there to the left. We also have a level sensor that's coming back into the water meth brain controller. The level sensor is reporting the level in the tank. If it gets too low, so the level starts to get down to next to nothing, obviously it's going to create a problem for us. It's going to run out of water meth solution and we will run lean and have a dangerous situation. So the level sensor is important. That reports back to the brain controller if there's a problem there in the tank. And if there is, it's a low level, it'll then send an output from the failsafe wire, and that's what we want to integrate to the link. Now we also have a couple other components here. We have our water meth nozzle that's located on the charge pipe, typically before the throttle body. We also have then a optional solenoid. That's essentially a check valve that the brain controller is controlling. This just makes sure that when you're done spraying the water meth, so it turns off, it's not going to siphon everything out of the line from the pump to the nozzle. That can be problematic because it can cause a temporary rich condition lasting 20-30 seconds that can create engine bogging. We definitely want to avoid that. So that's what the purpose of that optional solenoid is going to be. Again, that brain controller is controlling everything. Now, all we need to be concerned with in order to program this in conjunction with our link is looking at the very top of the brain controller. There's two wires. There's a yellow and a green wire. The yellow wire is our arming switch input. The green wire is the failsafe switch output. So we're going to be working with an input and an output from the brain controller. Specifically, the yellow wire, this should be set up to an on-off toggle switch in your vehicle. This allows you to turn on or off the water meth controller. This wire needs to be a 12-volt power into the yellow wire to actually tell that brain controller that it's armed. Now, what we're going to do is take the same on-off toggle switch and the same wire. So we have a 12 volt coming into the switch. Then the other output of the switch is going to go to that yellow wire. We're going to tap into that yellow wire and run that back into our link. So when the switch is on, the controller's armed and the link is aware that it's armed. So then we can use that for our programming. If the switch is off, then it's going to tell the link, well, the brain controller's off, the meth's off. Don't worry about compensating for when the water meth is spraying. So we have to set up a arming switched input for our water meth control. Then we also have to integrate that green wire. That's our fail-safe output. The green wire will be a low side output or grounding the ECU pin that we're going to connect that to here on the link. So when we have another pin set up for accepting the failsafe output, we can use that in our programming logic. So we're going to learn how we can integrate all this. Let's first start off with setting up the link to accept the arming switch input to tell the link that, okay, the water meth is armed, the brain controller is ready, and then we want our compensations tables to be in play. And then we'll also set up our failsafe output that's coming into the link. So arming switch, 12 volt, we have to wire it in here. Let's take a look at that real quick. And actually, you know what? Before we even move into programming, let's just quickly look at the Aquamist kit and the Aquamist schematic, because the idea behind how we have to integrate this is the same, but it's just slightly different in terms of the wiring colors for the Aquamist kit. So let's flip over here. Let's take a look at the Aquamist kit. So on the Aquamist kit, we're going to find a lot of different components. What we're only concerned about with the Aquamist kit is going to be our red wire. We're going to treat that as the arming switch input, the same as the yellow wire on the AM water meth brain. So that's going to be the same type of thing here with the Aquamist control brain. And then we have a failsafe relay. There's a brown and a white wire. We're interested in the brown wire. That will be sending a ground output when there's a problem within any of the circuitry control here for the Aquamist. So the idea behind how we're integrating this is the same, whether it's going to be an AM or an Aquamist kit. Okay, so now understanding that, let's jump in here and set a few things up. The first thing I'm going to do here is jump into digital inputs. I'm going to go here to my general purpose input 1 and set this as my water meth arming switch. So we're going to go in here. I'm going to go and change the labeling in here. Let's go ahead and just bring that window back up here. Let's try that again here. All right. So we're going to go into the label and we're going to call this water meth arming. And then we're going to go to our source. And then we're going to be setting this to a digital input. Digital input 3 is free here, so I'm going to go ahead and set that up for my G5 box. Now, it could be G4X or G5, doesn't matter. Because we're sending a 12 volt in with the arming switch on either the red or the yellow wire, depending if it's the AEM or if it's the Aquamist kit, they're both going to need a 12 volt in. So the arming switch, again, a toggle switch, we're going to be turning it off. That's going to be telling the link that we're not running water meth. We turn it on, that's going to be arming it and telling the link that we are ready to spray the water meth. So 12 volt is what we have coming in on that switch.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.